Happy NFL Draft Day, everyone. If you've been a good NFL fan, well, this past year, there's a defensive lineman from Georgia maybe waiting under your bed. If you've been bad, a punter from Vanderbilt is there. Please go check and see what awaits you. Jacksonville is on the clock, Jesse Cofield. It's all going down in Vegas, too. This is a fun day. Mike Golick, by the way, going to be joining us live from Las Vegas coming up here in just a few minutes. We got a great show.
We're also going to unveil our #1 NFL draft bust of all time today. I know everybody's been waiting with bated breath for that one. But for the most part, we're ripping through the DK Sportsbook, talking best NFL bets available to you right now because it is an exciting day. Now, good morning to panel number 1, DraftKings contributors Reed Fowler, Julian Edlow, and Steve Buchanan.
Yeah, hopefully no one follows DraftKings on Twitter because they definitely spoiled the #1 draft bust of all time, according to our analysts yesterday. But anywho, let's start with the #1 overall pick today, gentlemen. The line has moved a ton over the course of the last few weeks. Just over a month ago, you could get Georgia's Trayvon Walker at plus 3,000 to go #1 overall. Now he's a minus 450 favorite. So is he a lock to go first to the Jags here, Steve?
You know, when the juice continues to go up and we're basically day of, pretty good indication that's going to be your #1 guy. Really, since over the past 2 weeks, the line has been moving drastically on Walker. This has been the consensus now for over those 2 weeks now. And it's just, obviously a big, powerful force up front that the Jaguars can so desperately use. They need a lot of things, but, this is obviously one piece of the puzzle there. Emerson, somebody who can overmatch opposing pass protectors. He's going to be the guy that's going to be the disruptor over with Jacksonville now, minus 450. Really hard to go against that line at this point. Day of the draft, that's going to be your #1 pick.
Okay, Jules, how you feel about this one, dude?
Yeah, I mean, this is why I love betting drafts so much. This number isn't being bet up as, a heavy favorite that the public thinks is going to win. This is information. The Jaguars are first on the clock. There's nobody ahead of them. Can you lose some of these draft bets with steam? Sure, on a guy's over-under 15.5 or whatever, and the draft doesn't play out the way we think. This is the top of the draft, and the number tells you everything. Trayvon Walker is going to be the first pick. It's been decided on. If you listen to Unreasonable Odds last week, we had on Will Brinson and Connor Allen, and we gave out Aiden Hutchinson over 1.5 at plus 160. We gave out Trayvon Walker at plus 190. Will Brinson was kind enough to give us some of his inside information since he had already done what he needed to do with it, that being that a source very close to Doug Peterson said no ifs, ands, or buts. Walker is the pick, and that's what the number has done, and I trust it. And I have plenty of Walker, and I have plenty of Hutchinson over 1.5, and now all I have to do is watch Roger Goodell go to the podium and then make my money.
Reed, it's the most Jacksonville it's the most Jacksonville thing ever where the owner wants Hutchinson, the GM wants Walker, and the head coach wants an offensive lineman.
Yeah, this is typical Jacksonville. So I appreciate that you're on this call here with us, Emerson, because you can have some insight, not like Will Brinson on the Unreasonable Odds getting the absolute insight of no if, ends, or buts. You got to run to the window, even at minus 450 then, Julian. If it's guaranteed, you might as well do it.
Do it, coward.
But yeah, if you were watching MSG last week, I also mentioned Trayvon Walker that Julian alluded to at plus 190 to go 1 overall, because what do we know, right? Outside of what Julian and Steve just mentioned, what do we know about Trent Baalke? What is he like, right? He likes these type of players. He did it in San Francisco. He's going to do it again in Jacksonville. On top of that, yesterday, Emerson, we were talking about this. They signed Cam Robinson. They extended him for 3 years. So the idea that maybe Kwanu or Evan Neal as a long shot could have gone 1 overall, that kind of loses some steam as well, right? So it's a bunch of things, not just what everyone else is saying and the sources, the unknown sources that Julian's getting on Unreasonable Odds.
Jules, man, I got to start listening to that podcast.
Okay. Well, you should tune in. On the DraftKings Sportsbook, you can bet on the exact order of the top 3 here and get some pretty good value on it if you think you know how it's going down. Julian, it sounds like you do. Walker, Hutchinson, Stingley is the top choice at plus 190. So is that your top of the draft?
Yeah, I mean, I know everything. They don't even have to have the draft. I can just go walk to the podium and give out all the picks. No, it gets a little more complicated. This is definitely one of the most open drafts we've had in a long time. we've had Trevor Lawrence at the top, no brainer. Last year we knew 3 quarterbacks in a row. It was going to be Lawrence, Wilson, and Lance. We've had Joe Burrow at the top of drafts, and then it was obviously going to be Chase Young after. We don't know as much this year, but it sounds like the Lions have been planning to go. They've been looking at everybody, but they thought that Hutchinson wasn't going to be on the board, and now that he is, it sounds like they're going to go with the hometown defensive end there. So if we use those guys as the top 2 picks, I'm buying into the hype that could the Texans use an offensive lineman? For sure. They could use a lot of things. They stink. But I think most of all, they're looking at cornerback here. And Lovie Smith has said as much, that they need to add to the room here. And there's a reason that Stingley is picking up all this steam. It's because Houston really likes him. So I think that you have to go with a corner at 3. So I'll go with any top 3 combo here that gives us Walker, Hutchinson, and Stingley. And then maybe if you want to split them up, you go Walker, Hutchinson, and Sauce Gardner as well. Just in case the Texans are blowing a little bit of smoke here, to keep people away from trading up for Sauce Gardner, who very well could be the best player in this draft. So maybe they're trying to go with another corner here, but I think they're going with one of the 2, and you can play both of those. And you see the Stingley one already picking up steam. It was 190 just this morning.
Yeah, Reed, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's fine. Stingley at plus 190, it's still a really good number. Even if you're waiting, right? Like Julian is saying, it's already picking up steam. But I'll go on the other side of the coin and look at offensive line and Ekwonu at plus 330, right? With the assumption that Walker and Hutch go 1-2, which we all think that they will. That's pretty good value. And you talk about what Lovie Smith said. We always talk about this, right? You just mentioned Emerson. Like, the head coach wants something, the owner wants something else, and the GM completely is in his own world. And that could be the case here with the offensive line as a must in this, on this team. If Davis Mills is your guy, which it sounds like it is, you got to protect him. It doesn't matter who you have on the outside if the opposing team is just running because they're up 25 points in the 4th quarter. It doesn't matter how good Sauce Gardner or Stingley is, because he won't be defending anybody. You need to protect your quarterback. You need to score in this division. And if you're Houston, even getting Evan Neal at plus 1,300 with Hutch, at number 2 and Walker at number 1, that could also be the case as well, right? So I think there is some value in this number 3 spot. I'd rather go offensive line there.
All right, Steve, how do you want to approach this?
Yeah, I'm with Reed at plus 330, getting Walker, Hutchinson, and Ekwonu. I think it's just some really good value because, as Julian alluded to, there's so much openness in this draft once we really get after pick number 1. We really don't have like a solidified way of how this is going to go. So if I'm going to be betting the exact order here, I think the value at plus 330 is significant. And also you have to think about too that the Texans did get a contract restructure with Tunsil, but he can opt out after this year. So if Ekwonu is drafted, he could realistically take that spot from him, and they already don't have to get a replacement because he can play right tackle, he can play guard. Like, he is a multifaceted player, and this was somebody that for a while was touted to be the number 1 overall pick. So now if you're the Texans, you can grab this guy at 3. That's some pretty strong value right there. So I think just from a value standpoint, getting that at plus 330 is something you have to consider because there's so much openness in this draft.
There just could be absolute chaos tonight because usually you have a pretty good idea who's going like in the top 10, not necessarily this year. And you got to think there are 8 teams, guys, with multiple first-round picks, so it creates all kinds of trade up and trade down possibilities tonight. Should be exciting as hell for sure. Thanks, guys. Hang out, though, because we're going to talk some wide receiver and quarterback props coming up. Mike Golick also will join us live from Las Vegas. He's going to tell us who he thinks will be going number 1 overall. For the last week, though, we've been counting down the biggest draft bust of all time, and now it is time to reveal who our DraftKings analysts chose at number 1. Widely considered one of the biggest busts in sports, our top guy became, more well-known for what he did off the field than on it. It also doesn't really help when the guy taking 1 pick in front of you turned out to be one of the greatest to ever do it.
Yikes.
There were legitimately scouts at the time who were saying he should be taken over Peyton Manning.
And finally, the number 1 spot, Ryan Leaf.
Leaf was said to be the more natural overall player than Peyton Manning.
So the expectations weren't just high, they were astronomical.
There were no red flags about Ryan Leaf. He was very talented, had some successful seasons at Washington State, even though they're not very well known as a football team.
Maybe him being at Washington State and doing that wasn't as important as someone like Peyton Manning being at Tennessee.
I do think that you kind of have to be a little more cautious when you're assessing those sorts of players coming from small conferences.
All of a sudden you're thinking, well, this guy must be great. He's elevating all these players around him who aren't as good, and he must be a guy who we can build our franchise around.
This just goes to show that scouts can get things wrong.
Ryan Leaf, I think, is maybe a little bit more memorable because he was in the Peyton Manning draft.
In that role as the hype number 1 prospect, it didn't matter if he was going number 1 or 2. This was always going to be a disaster for Ryan Leaf.
With Ryan Leaf, I think we can all say his career would be no different regardless of landing spot, because he was going to do this to himself because of his attitude, because of his own personal issues.
He just didn't have the mental capacity to sort of take over and succeed in that environment.
He was notorious for not connecting well with his teammates.
And him thinking he was not a part of any of this failure with the San Diego Chargers.
And he was notorious for basically thinking that his talent could carry him in the NFL.
Making it easier to consider him a top bust because of how unlikable he was at the time. That has since changed. He's come out and, helped a lot of people and become a really good guy and looked in the mirror and, admitted that the reason he's this massive bust is on him.
Some people just can't handle that pressure and those expectations that kind of come with it.
He could not live up to the big moments.
What I remember most about Ryan Leaf's NFL career is him being angry all the time.
It's the fight in the locker room where he yells at all the reporters easily. That is classic, right up there with like Dennis Green, all-time NFL quotes.
I'll always remember him just being an angry dude.
I think Ryan Leaf is a classic situation of the talent is there, the work ethic and the determination to want to succeed at the highest level wasn't.
Ryan Leaf, the biggest bust in NFL history.
All right, Ryan Leaf, number 1 bust in NFL draft history. According to our analysts, this man was far from a bust. He was beefy, not a bust. Let's head to Las Vegas live. One of the newest members of the DraftKings family joins us now. Mike Golick. What's going on, man? How are you?
Well, listen, when you're a 10th rounder, when they don't even have 10 rounds anymore, and you're a 10th round out of 12 rounds and you're not expected to make it, you can't be a bust, right?
Yeah.
So luckily I was put in that position right out of the gate where I at least wasn't going to be a bust.
So is Ryan Leaf, would you agree that he's the top bust in NFL history here?
I mean, how about Jamarcus Russell?
Yeah. Yeah,
I think
he's up there.
I think Jamarcus Russell has got to be right up there. I mean, you always look at quarterbacks. I mean, you look at a guy like Tony Mandrich of how he came into the league, the offensive lineman, but he kind of redid his career and came back and had a decent career. I know with the Colts, so tough to put him in there. I know he gets talked about, but Ryan is certainly a good one. But I think Jamarcus Russell, because he, it was Ryan Leaf, Peyton Manning, Ryan Leaf, back and forth. Jamarcus Russell really vaulted up because of a great bowl game against my alma mater, Notre Dame. People knew who he was, this big, strong kid, and then he had a monster game against Notre Dame. Next thing you know, he's number 1 pick in the draft, and next thing you know, he's not doing a thing, and then he's gone. So I would rival Russell with Ryan Leaf.
Yeah, number 1 in that 2007 draft. I mean, the team dumped him in 2010 after just, 25 starts in 3 seasons, 7-18. Didn't see the field again after he was done there. But the Browns, we had Browns picks taking like 3 of the top 5 spots here, Mike. So we had Johnny Manziel, Trent Richardson, Tim Couch was on our top 5 list. What is it about Cleveland where they struggle with a lot of these top picks, man?
It's amazing because you sit there and you want to blame somebody, but they screwed up the draft over years, over GMs, over different head coaches. So that's a tough one. Do you say, I'm in Vegas, do you say bad luck? I mean, it can't be bad luck that long, but why I don't know what to pinpoint it on is because you can't just point to one administration and say it was all under them. This was under, as I said, different coaches and GMs and team presidents and stuff. So I'm amazed at it, but I think they've done well not only in the draft, but in free agency the last few years, and are certainly on the rise.
Yeah, Mike, you mentioned earlier you were taken in the 10th round. That was the 1985 draft, 255 overall by the Oilers. Yeah, the Oilers kids were a team back then at this time. Hey, what was the draft experience like for you?
Certainly different for me than the guys today. You know, my combine was at Arizona State. You know, we ran outside on the grass. You know, there wasn't, Lucas Oil at that point. And we did the same things. You prepare for pro days in the combine. The draft was only 2 days then and 12 rounds. So I actually got called at midnight. You know, it was like one of those, my brother was already in the NFL. He came to Notre Dame and brought a bunch of beer. And we had plenty of time to drink it because it took a long time for me to get called. So it was great to get picked, but it was a little anticlimactic because it was such a long wait and it was so late. But I was just happy to kind of breathe that sigh of relief and know I had a team at least, as they said, I was going to get issued a helmet and shoulder pads and had a chance.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you ended up being a hell of a defensive lineman there, too, especially like with your stint with the Eagles. And there are a couple of defensive linemen here that are expected to go towards the top tonight. Who do you think the Jaguars take number 1 overall, Mike?
Well, I mean, I know the talk has been Aiden Hutchinson, but Walker has been moving up the boards, which this is where it always shocks me because I did college games all year and I did Georgia a couple times, so I've obviously saw them live and on tape. And everybody got caught up on the fact that Walker didn't have monster stats. Well, the fact was they had a lot of great players on that defense. If you watched him, if football people watched him, you could tell how good he was and how versatile he could be at 275 playing outside, or the old New York Giant days of that NASCAR nickel where they put like all DNs and pass rushers, 4 of them on the field. He could kick down inside if you want him to do in that situation. So I always thought he was up high on that, but it always amazes me. You put on shorts and a t-shirt and wow somebody in numbers, and all of a sudden you move it up the draft boards. It blows my mind. It should be on football, and the football I saw to him, he deserves to be up near the top. I think they both pass rush well. They both play the run well, but Walker's a little more versatile. Like I said, he could slide down in some nickel situations, so won't shock me at all if he goes number 1. I know he's the betting favorite now, which he really climbed the ladder there. So I'd probably lean that way.
Yeah, we mentioned earlier in the show, I think he started at one point like he was plus 3,000 odds. Now he's the heavy favorite tonight, minus 450 on the DK Sportsbook. We got to talk about Kyle Hamilton, safety out of your alma mater with Notre Dame. Can you give us like a quick scouting report on him? I know he's expected to go in that first half of the draft.
So this is another one. They were talking about him going higher, the best prospect in the draft, and then he runs a 4.5, and all of a sudden he's falling down the boards. And again, it blows my mind. Watch him play football. Watch him cover the field and get to interceptions and get to coverage. He's 6'4", 220. He can play up high. He can play down in the box. He's versatile. That's what the safeties are today. You need to be versatile. You need to be a threat in the box to make plays, and obviously you need to be able to play the back end as well. And he can do both. Very, very mature, very football smart as well. So, again, another one I'm amazed. The straight ahead speed of a 4.5 isn't fast enough for some, so he starts to drop down the boards. I'll never understand that stuff.
Yeah, it's it's also expected to be a pretty busy, pretty damn good draft for wide receivers as well. I think as much as 6 or 7 are being projected. I think you got to go back as far as 2004 to find a first round that had 7 wide receivers going it. So who do you think has the biggest need for a wide receiver among the teams that are selecting tonight?
Well, I mean, you look at Green Bay hasn't taken a first rounder in a while, right? They stick to those second rounders. So a guy like Devontae Adams, who was a second rounder, turned out pretty well for him now with the Raiders. But I think they do. You look at Kansas City, they lost Tyreek Hill. So Kansas City probably does as well of what Tyreek did there. The Jets need a lot of things, but they could use a receiver as well. You wonder if something happens with Deebo Samuel that will affect where a wide receiver may go. That's the other thing you wait and see on draft day, our trades of players, which all of a sudden will shift the focus. But those are just a few teams who need wide receivers. But that's a deep class this year for sure. As many as you talked about, we could see go in the first round.
Yeah, and so what do we have? We have guys like Wilson, London, Williams. I mean, like Burks. I mean, Olave. Like, is there one that you're more excited
I like
for?
Williams. I like Williams. I know he tore the ACL in the title game. But man, what a route runner he is. Now, will he have to miss a little time? Will he be ready for camp? But will he have to go on the PUP list where he has to miss 6 weeks? Do you still take that chance? Because it all depends on a team's grade. If you have him graded high above everybody else, then and you think he's going to be back and fine, you take that chance. If it's a smaller margin, then you probably take the guy that will be able to play right away. But if you're asking me who I like best, I like him best.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned Green Bay. They're one of 8 teams with multiple first-round picks tonight. Like it could get really weird, really wild. What about another prospect in this draft that you're really excited about?
I love the kid Zion. It was Zion Johnson, I believe, from Boston College. Boy, it'd be awful if I got his name wrong. But I love his interior play, center and guard. I love what he's doing. When you play in the NFL, you got to be versatile. He played a lot of center. I think he'll play some guard as well. But I like him. I'm interested to see where he is going to go.
Yeah, you nailed it, by the way. You nailed the name.
Yeah.
I feel like you've been doing this long enough.
Yeah. I do like him. So I like him at the next level. I think he's one of those guys that is kind of, you'll put him on the field and you'll just, next thing you know, he's been in the league 12 years.
Hey, before you take off too, I know you got this new podcast that's been like a hit. You guys have been pulling in some massive guests. You and Jess Montana, like of the Levitard and friends. So anything you can tease for us here? Anything in the works right now with the show? We just love talking, not only in sports, but out of sports. We're both big into F1 now. So I think we're going to try and get a big F1 guest as well. And then, I'll just randomly get guys out. Like last night, at dinner here, I ran into the guy. I was a 255th pick in my draft in '85. The number 1 pick that year was Bruce Smith. We ended up chatting for about 5-10 minutes, just how things are going. So a guy like that may pop up on the pod, just to kind of talk and shoot the breeze. So we like to, and eventually I know we're going to get some chefs on, some people from the pop culture world. And once we're on video here, we're going to get Jess doing some baking because she makes some great desserts. Okay. Well, also, speaking of one of your family members, was talking to Jenny yesterday. She recommended this question here as a bonus question. You have 3 dogs. You have Hank, Harry, and Ted. So I need you to do a quick dog draft for me here. Who are you taking first overall among those 3 dogs? Well, Hank, listen, it's like talking about your kids. You love all your kids, but Hank's the OG. Hank's 11 years old, man. He just keeps on keeping on. So, we make sure we take care of him. The other dogs know he's a little older, and they're a little more, sometimes a little more gentle around him. Yeah. And then Harry is 6. Harry still has a ton of energy. He listens the best out of all the dogs. So I give him a lot of props for that. Ted is young. Ted's only about 8-9 months, and Ted is an absolute knucklehead. Ted is a linebacker or a nose tackle. He'll just run his head into anything and then just look at you like, hi, can I lick your face now? So he's a piece of work. Well, don't let Ted get discouraged being taken 3rd overall in your at-home dog draft because he is still a top 3 selection. Mike Golick, good talking to you, man. Thanks for hanging out with us today. You got it. No problem. All right, everyone, hang out. We got quarterback and wide receiver props coming up right after this quick break. All right, everyone, it comes down to basically these 2 quarterbacks on your screen, like which one is going to go first in this year's draft. These are the top 2. Liberty's Malik Willis, favored to be the first signal caller off the board at -190. Kenny Pickett, +170. to go first and get some plus money on him. Both these guys lighting it up in college. Actually, you had Mr. Pickett, who kind of made Pitt a football school once again.
All right, let's talk about DraftKings contributors who light it up. Steve Buchanan and Pierce Dietrich. They are here. Wow.
Oh, what a segue.
I know. Thanks.
You're a professional. I
Thanks.
want you to know that.
Thank you so much. I was just taking a nap over in the corner of the
Although
studio.
I heard you wake up when we mentioned Boston College.
I was like, what?
And then you went right back to sleep.
And then I fell asleep again. So quarterbacks, wide receivers, talking over under draft position. So Malik Willis, who we were just talking about, over under 13.5. What do we think about this, Steve? Where do you want to go?
Yeah, I like the over in this one. You look at the teams that are in the top 10. Are there teams in there that could use a quarterback? Absolutely. Is this the draft that you're going to be using a top 10 pick for quarterback? Absolutely not. Then you have the Commanders and Vikings. They're not going to be going QB at 11 and 12. So that really brings you to this number right here. So I think you're going over 13.5 for Willis here in this draft. Once we get into like the late teens, even in the early 20s, that's when I think the quarterback movement is going to start to pick up here. So I think over is the play in this one.
Pierce, do you want to go over? This is just not a draft where you take a QB top 10.
That is correct. Go with the over. Nothing has changed. This is a bad quarterback class. Don't buy into the hype, as if the teams are listening to me, but hopefully they have some common sense and don't overspend on a quarterback. The Panthers have too many holes. They've needed to fix their offensive line for years. Don't draft a quarterback. The Falcons have too many holes. This is not the time for them to get a quarterback. And really, there's no other place for these guys to go. Take defensive backs, take linemen, take the over.
All right, dude. So let's go Kenny Pickett. Over under Pierce, 16.5. What do you want to do here?
It's the same story. Take the over. And I mean, the fact that we're looking at the top quarterbacks and we're saying they're going to go in the middle of the first round tells you everything you need to know about the talent. And then you also just look at the needs of these teams. The teams that do need quarterback have more pressing needs, and they should not overspend a quarterback, especially when they can probably get a decent quarterback at the back end of the first round or maybe even the second round. So give me the over again.
All right, Steve. I mean, it's a quarterback league. Some believe they'll go higher than many people anticipate.
Yeah, I don't believe that at all. And quite frankly, I think I'd be doing Julian Edlow a disservice if I said it would be under this number. He would probably disown me. So actually, maybe that's actually not a bad idea.
Yeah, I was going to say,
that
what are you
being
doing?
said, like the Steelers feel like the team that could most likely be grabbing one of the two quarterbacks, and they're sitting at, I believe, at 20. So unless they're trading up earlier, I think this is where he stands pat here. So I think over 16.5 is once again the play. I mean, quite frankly, Pickett could be one of the last picks of the first round. So if that's the case, over 16.5 is most certainly the play to be looking at.
All right, Steve, let's just talk about the third quarterback selected. Cincinnati's Desmond Ridder is minus 200. Ole Miss Matt Corral plus 450. North Carolina's Sam Howell plus 550. Who's your money on?
Yeah, I think Ritter's the one here. Obviously, he's the favorite of this one. The over-under on his draft position is at 30.5, which would really kind of make or break the quarterback position total as well, because that's set at 2.5 for the first round. So that could really be the breaking point right there, unless somehow Pickett ends up falling out of the first round, which some people have said could even happen. I mean, he's an excellent pocket passer. He can move around with his feet. That feels like a nice spot for the Seattle Seahawks. They kind of had somebody who was like that before, but I think Ridder is going to be the third quarterback to go overall.
Pierce, do you want to go with Ridder here?
I don't want to go anywhere near this bet, to be completely honest with you, with Ridder being kind of the fifth guy earlier this season, but now we've seen him jump from 4,000 plus 4,000 to be the first pick to now he's up to plus 1,000. So, I mean, I saw one draft where he is going number 8 to Atlanta. I don't know what's going to happen with this third pick. I feel comfortable that 1 and 2 would be Willis and Pickett, but the third guy, I'm not going anywhere near.
All right, Steve, wide receiver has been talked about quite a bit. 6 or 7 could be taken, heck, maybe even more. So how about Ohio State wide receiver Garrett Wilson here? 9.5, over or under?
The wild card in this one is going to be the Falcons. They have a number of needs that they need to address, and wide receiver is obviously one of them. If they end up swiping Wilson at this spot, then obviously you hit it there. But if they pass on that, realistically, the most likely landing spot for Wilson after that is the Jets. So maybe we're talking about a top 10 pick here. So it really comes down to what you think the Falcons are going to do in this spot. They are the biggest wild card, I think, within the top 10 because they could go 2 or 3 different directions here. We're talking about overall talent. Wilson should be going to the Falcons. I think that's a good landing spot for him, but they end up passing on him. It's really going to be the Jets, or then he starts going into the early teens. So I think it's going to be under 9.5 because I feel like that's what it is. But I'm also just Steve Buchanan. I'm not a general manager, but I think under 9.5 is the right call.
Pierce, you're a general manager. Which one would you bet?
Yeah, I mean, Steve nails it. What's going to come down to is the Falcons today. The Jets aren't going to burn the 4th pick on the receiver. So if the Falcons fade it, then you've got the 10th pick is absolutely where the Jets will go with wide receiver. I think the Falcons will ultimately go with the skill position, go with the wide receiver. They've burned enough picks on linemen recently. It hasn't worked out for them. So I'll take the under as well, and he ends up with the Falcons.
All right, Jameson Williams, 11.5. Steve, do you want to go under this?
I mean, kind of the same story here. It really depends on what the Falcons do. If they don't end up taking a receiver, then the Jets would end up taking Wilson here, and then Williams would probably fall to the Jets. The Jets get the early defensive help with their first pick. The second pick, they should be grabbing a receiver. So, again, I still think this is a play for the under here, but the Falcons are what's really going to dictate how these dominoes fall, especially in the top 10 picks when it comes to receiver.
Pierce, you agree and see him going top 10?
I think he's going to go over, and as Golick was talking about him possibly starting on the PUP list, the teams that need receivers immediately in the Jets and the Falcons, they really can't have this guy not starting at the beginning of the season. They really need to have something going if they want to have any season whatsoever. So I think that they're going to take a more active, available wide receiver and maybe try to get him later in the draft.
All right, Pierce, over under first round receiver, 6.5.
I'm going to go under. There's just so much talent that I think a lot of these teams are going to gamble and try to get one of these guys in the second round. And I think some of them will fall to the second round. There's tons of depth. You don't really have to press to get a wide receiver. And some of these teams are going to be patient and they're going to sneak away with a good receiver in the second round.
What's it going to be, Steven?
Talking about this yesterday, I still like the under 6.5. If you had gotten this number before the trade with the Chiefs, you could have got 5.5. The over on that would have been, a really easy cash. Now we're here at 6.5. We're right on the number there. Could there be 7 receivers taken? Absolutely, especially once we get to the late picks in the first round here. But I still think under 6.5 is a play. I think this is a very defensive-heavy draft, which it usually is. But I think defensive is really going to dominate in the early picks here. So I'm still going under 6.5.
All right, good stuff, guys. Thank you. Stay tuned. Reed and Jeff are going to join us next. We're talking more props, including team specials. Ooh. We're back.
We are back.
I'm Jesse. He's Emerson. You're watching The Sweat, and right now we're going to welcome in DraftKings contributors Reed Fowler and Jeff Ulrich. Fellas, we're talking team specials, position totals, and more. Lots of props available on the DK Sportsbook. Very exciting. So there is one. The favorite bet on team draft specials. So that's the first position selected. So, Reed, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to the New York Giants here, and I think O-line at minus 180 is not a foregone conclusion, but they really need to do it, right? That's the one that I'm most comfortable with. There's other ones too. Talking about the AFC East with the Jets, I think there's an outside chance they take edge at plus 125, but offensive line for the Giants seems like a good fit at minus 180.
Jeff, where are you going?
Yeah, and I agree. I'd be pretty shocked if Evan Neal was there or Aquanu or even Charles Cross wasn't taken at number 5 for the Giants. I'm going to go with bigger odds though. I do think that with some of these quality teams on the back end, it's a little bit more up for grabs. And I think you're getting good odds on a team like the Buffalo Bills to take a defensive back at plus 150. A little bit under the radar news, but like Jordan Poyer potentially holding out for the Bills. Like they have some issues in there right now. And this is a pretty deep draft class for cornerbacks. I think that at plus 150 for the Bills to take a defensive back, I mean, you've got like the second odds for the Bills are running back at plus 230. I don't think the Bills are taking a running back there. I just think it's too high for them to do that. So, I think defensive back should actually be a bit shorter for them. They could definitely surprise and take an O lineman or a defensive lineman, but you see the odds there for them are like plus 500 to do that. I think defensive back is a pretty good value for the Buffalo Bills for first position draft for them.
All right, Jeff, let's go into position totals here. What's your favorite bet here? Give me a non-quarterback or wide receiver position.
Yeah, and I mean, I've harped on this one like for the entire week, and this number has not changed, but first round cornerbacks, cornerbacks with a C, drafted in the first round, over 4.5 is still a plus 120. I just mentioned the Bills are a team that's like their favorite to draft a cornerback. Guess what? The Patriots, they're plus 250 to draft a cornerback. The cornerback is the favorite position for the Patriots to draft as well. There's other teams like the Bengals who could easily go cornerback. We know there's at least 4 cornerbacks going in the first round. Like, I mean, I don't want to say it's a lock, but 4 guys, cornerbacks are almost certainly. So we just need like one guy like Kyler Gordon to shoot up. And these guys all have really good grades on them. So I think at 4.5, getting plus money to go over on the cornerback position here. Again, I'm surprised this one hasn't moved, but people just don't like drafting or targeting the defensive player bets. But I think over 4.5 cornerbacks is a very good bet for this draft.
All right, Fowler, which position do you have your eye on? I'm looking at offensive linemen here, which is obviously a stud group in this draft, 7.5.
Yeah, and going back to what Jeff was saying about cornerbacks, he's right. Sauce, Stingley, McDuffie, Daxton Hill are probably the 4, at least that I'm thinking, that are going in the first round. That leaves Kyer Elam, Kyler Gordon, right, and Pittry to be the other one other person, which I agree with. But I'm going under offensive linemen 7.5 at minus 190. Like, I don't think they come up towards the end of the first round, like we'll see with quarterbacks, right? We've always talked about quarterbacks coming at the end, so these teams can get that 5th-year option. And so I do like the over 2.5 quarterbacks at minus 115. I know we're not supposed to choose that, but still a good bet. And that's come down. It was minus 160 earlier. Now it's at minus 115. I do like that, but under 7.5 offensive linemen, I think they're going to go, very fast at the beginning of the draft, but you're not going to see a lot of them towards the end.
Okay, guys, so there's something on the DK Sportsbook called draft matchups. So it's players being pitted against each other, which one of them is going to be drafted first. So what's your favorite bet on here, Reed?
Yeah, Drake London over Kyle Hamilton. I know Mike Golick was talking about Hamilton, and I agree with him. I don't know why he's sliding, but that's just the nature of the draft, and that's the nature of the safety position, that it's just not valued extremely high, and especially against a wide receiver. And Drake London has been rising up draft boards. So you take a look at their props individually. London's draft prop is 10.5, and it's minus 115 to both sides. And you take a look at what Kyle Hamilton is, it's like 12.5, I believe. And if you take a look at the teams that need those positions, right, I believe it's the Commanders and the Jets, right, in that 10-11 spot. I think that's where they go. I think London goes at that 10 spot to the Jets, and Hamilton potentially goes to that 11 spot with the Commanders. So I like it a lot. It's minus 160, so you got to lay some juice, but Drake London over Kyle Hamilton.
Jeff, what's your pick here?
I like that one too. Drake London does feel like he's got a chance to be like, if not the first wide receiver off the board, like second. So that was definitely one that's on my radar. I'm going to go with, I'm going to stick with the cornerback position. I'm really, standing for cornerbacks in this segment. Trent McDuffie is plus 120 to go before Chris Olave. And it's not that I don't like Chris Olave. It's just this wide receiver group in the first round, there's so many different ways it could work out. One of these guys is going to slide. Like, not everyone is going like 12th or something like that. So Olave is a guy I could see going in the 20s. And I think McDuffie, once the first 2 cornerbacks go off, people are going to rise to get him. So I think the fact that, like, I just look at this line, and I think it should be closer to even than Olave being a huge favorite, which he is. So Trent McDuffie plus 120. Again, I feel like all these cornerback lines, when you look at the position totals and it goes to the matchups, they're just a little bit undervalued. And I think, again, you can target it in the matchups.
And Jeff, to your point, I think Buffalo is that team that trades up for Trent McDuffie, right? Like, they're that team that could trade up with someone in that 12-13 spot that potentially wants to trade down.
I think there's a good chance. Someone panics. They either overdraft McDuffie or they trade up to get him once the top 2 guys are off the board.
Guys, we'll get you out here with this. Your favorite draft pick parlay bets. Reed.
I'm going Garrett Wilson first and Drake London second, wide receiver taken at plus 350. Jets take. They potentially could take Wilson. Oh, I know I just mentioned that London might go there, but I do think that Wilson is someone that I do like as well. And London going at number 12.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, this one is. I'm honestly having a very tough time to decide here, but I'm going to go first QB selected Malik Willis, second QB selected Kenny Pickett. Excuse me. I just think that eventually someone's just going to come up and grab him. The Steelers. The Seahawks. There's just too much raw talent there for someone to just let him slide. And Pickett is a guy who could also just, if all the quarterbacks slide, that's fine too. I think Willis could still end up in front. So Willis first, second QB selected, Kenny Pickett plus 125.
All right, good stuff, guys. Appreciate it.
Goodbye.
The sweat will be. Yeah. Did you say goodbye?
Yeah, I said goodbye to them.
All right. See you guys later. Welcome back to The Sweat. I'm Jesse Cofield. He's Emerson Latzia. He's wearing shorts underneath this desk. I want everyone to know it is 40
Don't
degrees.
you do it, Billy.
It's 40 degrees
Don't
in Boston.
you do it,
and
Billy.
My man, shut
Billy!
him!
No! Oh, that's my thigh, Billy.
We really need to get, some sort of a free-to-play pool going every day about whether Emerson's wearing pants or shorts.
Yep.
But right now, let's bring in DraftKings contributors Julian Edlow and Nick Fryer. Fellas, we're talking draft position over-under. We're starting with NC State, Akeem Ekwonu, 4.5. Julian, where do you think this offensive tackle is going?
Yeah, it feels like he should go top 4, and the juice heavily suggests that. And I'm scrolling through DK Sportsbook right now. What is he at? He's up to minus 200 to be a top 4 pick, essentially. So it's probably not bettable at this stage. If you bet him, you probably want to use him in like one of those exacta boxes for the top 3-4 picks and slide him into the 3 or 4 spot. I don't even know if top 4 is up anymore. It might come back up. Houston at 3 makes a lot of sense. And to me, I know a lot of people don't see it, but to me, the Jets at 4 makes a lot of sense with what's going on with Mekhi Becton. And 2 picks in the top 10, make it all about Zach Wilson. Take an O-lineman, take a wide receiver. That's what I think the Jets do. So it's under or pass for me here. Although if Evan Neal is higher on someone's board or whatever, you can get good plus money on him going up, and the Giants either at 5 or 7 will use one of those picks, even Carolina too. So strong lean to the under. I don't know if it's bettable anymore.
Yeah, like Julian said, it's minus 200 for under 4.5 right now, Nick.
Yeah, I'm with Julian and lockstep on this one. I mean, you look at what the Jets need and what the Texans need, and then what it looks like at the offensive line position outside of that. Like, he's one of the best 2, if not the best offensive tackle in this, and he's versatile. I think that there's no question that that you have to go the under here if you're going to take this one. Also a guy who protects the run well, too. So, I don't see him going past the Jets in this one.
All right, Nick, Cincinnati corner, Ahmad Gardner, 5.5. Over or under?
Yeah, with these corners that we're talking about today, it's interesting. I go with the over on this one. I do think that, of course, talent-wise, he deserves to go a little bit higher. But we're talking about needs and the talent that's at the top of this draft. I think we know where the Jaguars and the Lions are going to lean with this one. But then when we're talking about, the Texans, the Giants, the Jets, they all have needs outside of corner. Don't get me wrong. I do think that the Giants could end up taking him. But I still think that right now, that there's another corner that the Giants could go with as well, and the other 4 teams. I just don't think he's going to be on their radar in these first 4 picks.
All right, which way you leaning, Jules?
Yeah, it's these draft props. You want to get him early. Now we're at draft day, and it's like, he was there at 7.5 for a while, and then you get both of those Giants picks incorporated. Now you need the Giants to use their first pick on him and wait to go with an offensive lineman, which we think, one of those 2 picks needs to be used for. So Houston is going to be in the mix at 3. It sounds like they prefer Stingley, but what if that's just kind of a smoke to avoid somebody from trading up for a guy that people think could be the best player here? What if the Jets are in play at 4? I lean to the under. I think one way or another he is going to be a top 5 pick, but again, it's not playable. The under 7.5 is what you wanted to get about a week ago.
All right, Jules, we got Derek Stingley, 7.5. The under is minus 145 right now.
This one I will still go under, and again, like I've got him under 12.5. I've played him under 10.5, and now here we are at 7.5. I'll still lay minus 145 because again, he's the favorite to be the number 3 overall pick to Houston. So you have that one going for you, a team that could use a corner. Let's say they go Sauce Gardner at 3. The Jets could be in play at 4. And then both Giants picks at 5 and 7 are in play, and you cover your bases with both of those. And again, if Sauce Gardner goes 3, 4, or 5, and the corner market heats up, I know Carolina would love to trade back. So maybe somebody trades up to beat the Giants at 7 and take them at 6. I think there's a lot of ways you can win this one still.
Nick, no brainer to take the under here?
Yeah, where I think Gardner might be an over, I think Stingley's going to be an under here. And I think Julian highlighted it pretty well. But when I look at the Giants, too, I do think they'll take him with that second pick. I like this a lot more at 9.5, which is where we were looking at it the other day, because then Seattle could be in the mix in this one as well. But I think Julian raises a very good point. When you look at the Panthers, too, and they if they're going to be taking a QB, they can afford to slide a little bit. So maybe trade down a little bit, get some more draft capital. But I think the Giants, if it gets to them with their second pick in the top 7, that I don't think they're going to pass up on him at all. I mean, he's been linked to him already.
Nick, Georgia defensive lineman Jordan Davis looked at as one of the more unique prospects in this draft. Has some freakish ability in the trenches. They're 13.5. Would you go over or under?
Yeah, this one's an easy over for me on this one. We were looking at him at 15.5 as of yesterday. I was thinking this one might be a little bit close because I was thinking it's going to be the Ravens or it's going to be the Eagles that might end up taking him just based on need. And I understand it's not all solely based on need the way these teams pick. But looking at this high in the draft, I think there's too much talent that fits needs for these other teams where I don't think that he's gonna go this high as much as there's a big drop-off when you look at the 3 interior defensive linemen.
Jules, you going over as well?
At 13.5, I'm going over. At 14.5, where it was, I'm going under. The numbers matter here, and I've played him under 14.5 and played it back with a little bit of over on the 13.5. Because ultimately, I think Baltimore is the spot. He's heavily linked to Baltimore, who picks at number 14. He could be a surprise pick in that 8 to 13 range. It wouldn't shock me. But at 13.5, I think you have to go over. You win on Baltimore, and then his range all along, like Nick said, has been kind of that 15 to early 20s. He'd be a steal in the 20s. But, yeah, it's probably going to be this teen area. So here you got to go over. But I am personally on under 14.5. That's how this works.
Wow.
All right, let's talk about a fellow Eagle, Boston College's Zion Johnson.
So excited about this.
I mean, because it's really rare that we have BC players that are being talked about this much on draft day. Jules, you wrote an article last night saying that you liked the under for 24.5 for his draft position for Zion Johnson. The under's minus 160 right now. It was minus 125 when you wrote the article yesterday, but you like this.
Wow, Jules.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm making my best bet on Zion Johnson, it's that fellow Eagle, Jesse Cofield, couldn't pick him out of a lineup of 10 guys walking down the street. They all have to be big guys. They all have to be offensive lineman-sized guys.
Yes.
So not like me.
Oh, my God.
Like college Emerson, maybe.
Hey, and Golick was on earlier, and he said he likes this guy a lot.
That is true.
Yes. Yeah. No, so I like Zion Johnson a lot. So we're talking about all these outside O linemen, the tackles, Icky, Neal. This is probably the best interior O lineman in this class. And I think that his range starts in the teens, especially if we see the tackles fly off the board early in some of these teams that want protection for their young quarterbacks come into play. I know Reed had him to the Chargers to protect Justin Herbert in our group mock yesterday. That would make sense, and that's in the teens. But then I think as we fall, Patriots, local guy, they make sense at 21. And then I love where we're getting the hook here because the Cowboys are taking an O-lineman because they have lost so much there, and they pick at number 24. So I really think 24 is going to be the floor for Zion Johnson.
Nick, what do you think? Few teams like that could really use the help inside protecting those young QBs.
Sure, and of course we want to see this BC guy go as high as humanly possible.
Obviously.
Y'all just absolutely love Boston College. But yeah, I'm gonna go with the under here as well. I think this is one of the easier ones of the ones that we're going over today because when you look at the interior lineman, the only guy who you could say is ahead of him is Tyler Lindenbaum. But even then, we could easily see him going a little bit later than Zion Johnson in this one. Of course, in our mock draft the other day, he went higher or later, excuse me. But yeah, between the teams that are looking to bolster and protect their quarterbacks, or some of these teams that maybe need a little bit help improving their ground game too, or protecting some of their top running backs, I think that there's just a lot of teams that could use Zion Johnson's talents, especially when we're going to see a lot of offensive tackles flying off the board early.
Nick, you can also bet on players just to make it into the top 32 here. So basically to go in the first round. Is there someone at plus money you like to get selected tonight? Someone with some value maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I got a couple guys for plus money, but nothing crazy, really. I think George Pickens, he's at even money right now. Coming out of Georgia, of course, I liked him going to the Titans when we were doing our mock draft the other day. But just in general, this guy's is a first-round talent, and I understand his post-ACL injury, but we see that solid dash time a year after the ACL injury, and we know how short of hands he had throughout his college career. I just think this is a guy who can easily slip into the first round because he is a first-round talent. I know this is a deep wide receiver class, which is also why if you don't like George Pickens, then I think Sky Moore is the way to go at plus 140, the shifty 21-year-old wide receiver out of Western Michigan.
All right, Jules, what's the play tonight here?
Is Pickens really just even money to be in the first round?
Yep, that's what I saw it as.
Wow. Where's his draft prop? His draft prop is 36.5. So I'm going to take Nick's bet if you like him and just make it better because that's what I do for our fellow analysts. They're my friends.
What a guy.
Take more plus money on Pickens under 36.5. Give yourself a few more outs if you think he's going to go early. I happen to disagree with Nick and think he's going to go over 36.5.
Good.
Besides the torn ACL, he also has some personal issues that GMs don't like. But for a first-round guy, Jeff has been talking up the corners. All show today, all show yesterday. Kyler Gordon is even money to go in the first round. I put him on my plays on Twitter at plus 125. It's moved a little bit. I think one of those teams in the late 20s is probably going to need a corner, and all the top four are going to be off the board, and they'll go with Gordon.
All right, good stuff, fellas. Thank you. Julian, stick around. We're going to get your lock bet coming up next.
Bye, Nick.
Bye, Nick.
Bye.
One more block to go. This is what we'll be right back.
All right, guys, we are back. Less than 3 minutes to go in show. DraftKings contributors Reed T. Fowler, Julian Edlow, Steve Buchanan are here to share their draft locks. Jules, what is your lock bet tonight on the DK Sportsbook?
Yeah, the numbers moved. I've bet Kenny Pickett over 10.5 in this draft. I've bet Kenny Pickett over 12.5 in this draft. It sits at 16.5, and I will take Kenny Pickett on draft day over 16.5. Quarterbacks are not going to be flying off the board in this draft because there aren't good ones. All 5 quarterbacks that went in the first round last year would have gone ahead of Willis and Pickett. In this one, if a guy goes first, it's going to be Willis, and by the time we get to Pickett's range, it's really going to be 19, 20, and I think he could even slip beyond that.
All right, Reed, your lock, please.
Yeah, the New York Giants' first player selected as an offensive lineman at minus 180. You got to go here. If Daniel Jones is your guy, if that is your player, you need to protect him. This guy was running for his life last year. There's 3 amazing tackles. So at that 5 spot, the offensive line is a must. The Giants have 2 right in the top 10, but that first pick, offensive lineman at minus 180.
Steve, lock in your favorite DK Sportsbook NFL draft bet.
Yeah, Derek Stingley Jr. go under 7.5. There's a number of teams that he could land within the first 7. And if someone takes, Sauce Gardner ahead of him, that quarterback market, like Julian said, is going to start to heat up. Some team is going to grab him within the first 7 picks here. So I think under 7.5 is the way to go.
All right, good stuff, you three. Thank you. Appreciate it. That
Great
is
show.
a show.
Great show, everybody. Good job, Slates.
Happy NFL Draft Day to everybody.
Slates.
Make sure you tune into Madden at noon, the slate this evening at 5, and we'll be back tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. for another edition of The Sweat. See you then. Enjoy the draft.